Hello, dear friend. Come, settle in. I have a story to tell you. One that might hurt a little because it might feel familiar. But I promise you, if you stay with me, there's hope on the other side of this hurt. This is a story about a mother named Helen, about the son she raised alone, about the slow, devastating way she disappeared from his life, and about what happened when he suddenly needed her again. But more than that, this is a story about something many of us know too well: the particular grief of losing someone who's still alive, the pain of being replaced, the confusion of wondering what you did wrong when your crime was simply loving too much. If you're a mother who's felt invisible, if you've watched your child build a life that doesn't seem to have room for you, if you've sat by the phone waiting for calls that don't come, or seen photos of family gatherings you weren't invited to, this story is for you. If you've ever been told you're too involved, too needy, too much, when all you wanted was to be part of your child's life, this story is for you. And if you've ever had to choose between staying small to keep someone's love or standing tall and risking losing them, oh, dear friend, this story is especially for you. I won't lie to you, this journey has painful moments. Helen's story breaks before it heals, but that's often how real healing works, isn't it? Sometimes we have to fall apart completely before we can put ourselves back together in a way that's actually whole. So, take a breath. Maybe pour yourself some tea. Get comfortable. Because we're about to walk through Helen's story together, through the heartbreak and the rebuilding, through the choices that nearly destroyed her and the choices that saved her. And maybe, just maybe, you'll find pieces of your own story here too. Let's begin. Helen Porter was 58 years old, and if you asked her who she was, she would have told you. Marcus's mother. Not because she didn't have other roles. She'd been a school librarian for 30 years, had friends, hobbies, a sister she adored. But at her core, the thing that defined her most completely was being Marcus's mother. She'd raised him alone since he was 12, since the night a drunk driver had stolen her husband David from them both. Those early years had been brutal. A widow at 39 with a grieving preteen son and bills that didn't care about her heartbreak. But they'd survived. More than survived. They'd become a team. Helen and Marcus against the world. She remembered those years with a bittersweet ache. The two of them eating dinner at the kitchen table every night, talking about everything: school, friends, dreams, fears. Movie nights every Friday, taking turns choosing films. The way Marcus would come to her with every problem, every joy, every thought worth sharing. "You're not just my mom," he'd told her once, maybe 16 years old, after she'd stayed up all night helping him with a college application essay. "You're my best friend." Helen had treasured those words, held them close, built her identity around them. Even as Marcus grew older, went to college, started his career as a junior architect, they'd stayed close. He lived 20 minutes away and came over every Sunday for dinner. They'd talk for hours about his work, his dating life, his dreams of someday designing sustainable housing. Helen knew everything about her son's life because he told her everything. She was proud of that closeness, proud of raising a son who wasn't afraid to love his mother, who didn't buy into toxic masculinity that said men should be distant from their families. Marcus was kind, thoughtful, sensitive. He called her just to say hi. Remembered her birthday, not just with a card, but with thoughtful gifts and a whole day spent together. When she had the flu, he brought soup and sat with her, making sure she was okay. He was a good son. No, he was a wonderful son. Past tense. Because 3 years ago, everything changed. 3 years ago, Marcus met Nicole. And slowly, achingly, Helen began to disappear from her son's life. Now she lived alone in the house where she'd raised Marcus. His bedroom was still upstairs, unchanged except for fresh paint. Photos of him covered the walls. Baby pictures, school photos, college graduation. Him and Helen smiling together at various stages of his life. The house was full of memories, but empty of the person those memories belonged to. Helen's phone sat on the kitchen counter, silent more often than not. No Sunday calls anymore. No random texts. No Marcus showing up with takeout just because. The silence was deafening, and Helen was learning what it meant to grieve someone who was still alive. Helen remembered the first time Marcus mentioned Nicole. It was 3 years ago, during one of their Sunday dinners. Marcus had seemed distracted, checking his phone more than usual, smiling at the screen in a way that made Helen's stomach tighten with something she couldn't name. Not quite dread, more like premonition. "Mom, I need to tell you something," he'd said, setting down his fork. "I met someone." Helen had smiled, pushing down the flutter of anxiety. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Tell me about her." "Her name's Nicole. She's a corporate lawyer. Really successful, really smart. We met at a networking event for young professionals. Mom, she's amazing." The way he said it, breathless, almost reverent, should have made Helen happy. Her son was in love. Wasn't that what every mother wanted? But something in his tone worried her. He didn't sound like himself. He sounded like someone trying to convince himself of something. "I'd love to meet her," Helen had said, meaning it. She wanted to like whoever made her son happy. 2 weeks later, Marcus brought Nicole to Sunday dinner. Helen had cooked Marcus's favorites: pot roast, mashed potatoes, apple pie. She'd set the table with her good china. She'd wanted to make a good impression, to show Nicole that Marcus came from a loving home, that she'd be welcomed into their family. Nicole arrived in a sleek black pantsuit, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She was beautiful, polished in a way that made Helen suddenly conscious of her own casual jeans and cardigan. Her graying hair, her makeup-free face. "Mrs. Porter, so nice to meet you," Nicole said, shaking Helen's hand with a grip that was just a touch too firm. Professional. Distant. "Please, call me Helen." "Of course, Helen." The name came out sounding wrong, like Nicole was testing it and finding it wanting. Dinner was awkward. Nicole picked at her food, making comments that seemed innocuous but landed like small cuts. "This house is so vintage. Have you thought about updating? Open floor plans are really in right now. Marcus talks about these Sunday dinners all the time. It's sweet how traditional you two are." "Oh, is that Marcus as a baby? How embarrassing for you, Marcus, that she still has these photos up." Marcus had laughed uncomfortably at that last comment. Hadn't defended the photos. Hadn't said, "I love that my mom keeps our memories alive." He'd just laughed. Helen had tried to engage Nicole in conversation, asking about her work, her family, her interests. Nicole answered politely but minimally, always steering the conversation back to Marcus, to his career, to his potential. "Marcus could be doing so much more with his architecture degree," Nicole said at one point. "He's talented, but he's not ambitious enough. Too comfortable, I'm working on that." Working on that? As if Marcus was a project. Something to be improved. Helen had felt a chill but said nothing. She wanted to like Nicole. Marcus clearly cared about her. And who was Helen to judge after one dinner? "So?" Marcus had asked as they cleared the table. "What do you think?" Helen had chosen her words carefully. "She seems very driven. Do you love her?" "Yes," Marcus said immediately. "Mom, she's exactly what I need. She challenges me, pushes me to be better." Helen had hugged him, swallowing her concerns. "Then I'm happy for you, sweetheart." But late that night, alone in her house, Helen couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just met someone who saw her as competition. Someone who wouldn't be content to share Marcus. Someone who would make Helen choose between being honest about her concerns and keeping her son's love. Helen had chosen silence. It was the first of many compromises that would slowly erase her from Marcus's life. The changes didn't happen all at once. That was the cruelest part. If Nicole had immediately demanded that Marcus cut off his mother, Helen could have fought back, could have named the problem. But it was gradual. Death by 1,000 small cuts. First, the Sunday dinners became every other week. "Nicole and I have plans," Marcus would say apologetically. "But I'll see you next week for sure." Then every other week became once a month. Then once a month became, "I'll let you know when I'm free." The daily texts dwindled to weekly check-ins. The phone calls, those long, rambling conversations where Marcus told her everything, became brief updates. "Can't talk long, Mom. Nicole and I are heading out." 6 months after meeting Nicole, Marcus proposed. Helen found out through a Facebook post before Marcus called to tell her. She'd stared at her phone, at the photo of Marcus and Nicole, Nicole's ring glinting, both of them glowing with happiness. She'd waited 2 hours for Marcus to call. When he finally did, he'd sounded distracted. "Did you see? We're engaged." "I did. Congratulations, sweetheart. I'm so happy for you." She'd meant to sound joyful. She'd sounded hollow instead. "We're thinking a short engagement. Maybe 6 months? Nicole wants to start planning right away." "Of course. I'd love to help with whatever you need." "That's great, Mom. Nicole's mom is pretty involved, but I'm sure there's stuff you can do too." Stuff you can do too. As if Helen was a helpful bystander instead of the mother of the groom. The wedding planning was a nightmare Helen endured with a smile painted on her face. Nicole's mother, Patricia, took charge of everything. The venue, Patricia's country club. The caterer, Patricia's favorite from her own daughter's wedding. The guest list, heavily weighted toward Nicole's family and friends. Helen offered suggestions that were politely dismissed. She offered to pay for things and was told it was already handled. She asked Marcus if he wanted any input, and he'd said, "Nicole and her mom have great taste. I trust them." At the wedding, held 8 months after the proposal, not 6, because Patricia needed more time, Helen had felt like a guest. A distant relative invited out of obligation. She'd worn a beige dress because Patricia had mentioned the mothers should coordinate, and then shown up in champagne gold, making Helen look washed out in photos. She'd given a toast that Nicole had edited beforehand, cutting out the stories about young Marcus, the memories that Nicole deemed not appropriate for the tone we're going for. She'd danced with Marcus for the mother-son dance, 3 minutes of her holding her son while he looked over her shoulder at his new wife, clearly wanting it to be over. "I'm so proud of you," Helen had whispered. "Thanks, Mom," Marcus had said, distracted. It was the last time she'd felt truly close to him. After the wedding, the distance accelerated. Marcus and Nicole bought a house, not 20 minutes from Helen, but an hour away. "Better school district for when we have kids," Marcus explained, "and closer to Nicole's parents. Her dad's health isn't great, so we want to be nearby." Helen understood. Of course she understood. But it stung that Marcus hadn't even mentioned looking at houses near her. Hadn't considered that his mother might want to be close to future grandchildren, too. Holidays became negotiations. "Nicole's family does this big Christmas thing, so we'll do Christmas Eve with you. Okay, Mom?" Then Christmas Eve became Christmas Eve lunch. "We need to be at Nicole's parents' by 4. Then Christmas Eve lunch became, "We might stop by for a bit, but Nicole's family has a lot going on." Then it became a text. "Merry Christmas, Mom. Things are crazy this year. We'll catch up soon." Marcus's birthday had always been sacred. Helen would cook his favorite meal, lasagna, garlic bread, chocolate cake, and they'd spend the evening together, just the two of them, talking and laughing and celebrating him. The first birthday after the wedding, Nicole planned a dinner party. 15 people at an expensive Italian restaurant. Helen was invited but sat at the far end of the table, making awkward conversation with Nicole's aunt while Marcus held court at the other end, Nicole by his side, her hand possessive on his arm. The second birthday, Helen wasn't invited at all. She'd texted happy birthday that morning and received a thumbs-up emoji in response. A thumbs-up emoji for the son she'd labored for 22 hours to bring into the world, the boy she'd raised alone, the man she'd sacrificed everything to give a good life. A thumbs-up emoji. Helen had called him that evening, hands shaking. "Hey, Mom, can't talk long." "Marcus, was there a birthday dinner?" A pause, too long. "Yeah, sorry. Nicole's mom organized it kind of last minute." "I thought you were busy with that library thing." There was no library thing. Nicole's mother had organized her son's birthday party, and somehow Helen, his actual mother, had been forgotten. "Marcus, I'm never too busy for your birthday." "I know, Mom. I'm sorry. We'll do something soon, okay? Just you and me." They never did. 6 months ago, Helen had been scrolling through Facebook, something she rarely did anymore because it hurt too much to see the life Marcus was living without her. But this day, she'd logged on. And there, posted by Patricia, Nicole's mother was a photo album titled Marcus's 29th birthday celebration. 23 photos. Both families gathered around a table at a nice restaurant. Marcus blowing out candles on a cake. Nicole feeding him a bite. Patricia hugging Marcus, beaming like he was her son. Helen's hands had started shaking. Both families. She zoomed in on the photos, studying each face. Nicole's parents. Nicole's siblings and their families. Marcus's co-workers. Friends Helen didn't recognize. No Helen. She scrolled through all 23 photos with tears streaming down her face, looking for herself. Some explanation. Some proof that she'd been there and just wasn't in these particular shots. But no, she hadn't been there. Nicole's mother had organized a birthday party for Helen's son, invited both families, and somehow Helen, the woman who'd given birth to him, raised him, loved him more than life itself, hadn't made the list. Helen had called Marcus immediately, not caring that it was 10 p.m., not caring that she was crying. "Mom, what's wrong?" "There was a birthday party," she'd said, voice breaking. "Both families, I saw the photos." Silence. Then, Oh, Mom, I'm sorry. It was last minute. Nicole's mom she organized it and I thought you were busy. I texted you happy birthday. You responded. You knew I wasn't busy. Oh, I don't know, Mom. It just happened. I'm sorry. Marcus, am I still part of your life? The question had hung there, too big, too painful, too honest. Of course you are. Don't be dramatic. Dramatic. Helen had ended the call and spent 3 days in bed, calling in sick to work, crying until she had no tears left. On the 4th day, she'd gotten up, showered, and made a decision. She stopped calling, stopped texting first, stopped reaching out. She decided to wait and see how long it would take Marcus to notice her absence. 3 weeks passed before he sent a text. "Everything okay? You've been quiet." Not a call. A text. Helen had stared at those words for 20 minutes before responding, "I'm fine." She wasn't fine. She was grieving the loss of her son while he was still alive, grieving the relationship they'd had, the closeness she'd thought was unbreakable, grieving the grandmother she'd thought she'd be someday, involved, cherished, essential, grieving the woman she'd been, Marcus's mother, his best friend, his person, because that woman no longer existed in Marcus's life. She'd been replaced by Nicole, by Nicole's mother, by a version of family that had no room for Helen. And Helen had no idea how to survive this particular kind of loss. The months after Helen's realization were the darkest of her life. Darker in some ways than losing David. Because when David died, she'd been allowed to grieve. People brought casseroles. Friends called to check on her. The world acknowledged her loss and gave her space to feel it. But this? Losing Marcus while he was still alive? There was no casserole for that. No sympathy cards. No one who understood the specific agony of being erased by your own child. Helen went through her days like a ghost. She got up, went to work at the library, smiled at patrons and helped children find books and organize shelves. She functioned. But she wasn't living. She came home each evening to the empty house and felt the silence pressing in on her like a physical weight. She'd stand in front of the refrigerator, staring at the photos held up by magnets. Marcus at every age, Marcus and Helen together, smiling, close, a unit. Those photos felt like lies now. Evidence of a relationship that no longer existed. She stopped cooking Sunday dinners. What was the point? She'd been making Marcus's favorite meals every week out of habit, hoping he'd show up, hoping he'd remember. But he never did. Now she ate cereal for dinner. Or toast, or nothing at all. Her friends from work noticed. "Helen, are you okay? You seem off." "I'm fine," she'd say, the lie coming easier each time. "Just tired." Her sister Claire called every few days, increasingly worried. "Talk to me, Helen. What's going on?" "Nothing. I'm fine." But she wasn't fine. She was drowning in a grief that had no name, no acknowledgement, no endpoint. She avoided Marcus's room, Couldn't bear to look at it. This shrine to a boy who'd grown into a man who'd forgotten her. She stopped looking at Facebook entirely. Couldn't stomach seeing photos of Marcus's life. Dinners with Nicole's family, weekend trips, happy moments that didn't include her. She stopped making plans. Stopped seeing friends. Stopped doing anything beyond the bare minimum required to survive. Her coworker Diane cornered her one day in the library's back office. "Helen, I'm worried about you. You've lost weight, you barely talk anymore. What's happening?" Helen had tried to brush it off, but Diane persisted. And finally, Helen broke. "My son doesn't want me in his life anymore," she whispered. "And I don't know how to exist when being his mother was who I was." Diane had hugged her while Helen cried. Silent, shaking sobs that came from somewhere deep and broken. "Have you talked to him about this?" Diane asked gently. "What would I say? Please love me? Please remember I exist? I can't force him to want a relationship with me." "But Helen, you can't just disappear yourself. You have to talk to someone, your sister, a therapist, someone." Helen nodded, knowing Diane was right, but too exhausted to do anything about it. She went home that night and sat in Marcus's old room for the first time in months. Sat on his childhood bed and looked at the posters still on the walls. Bands he'd loved. Movies they'd watched together. She picked up his old baseball glove from the shelf, held it to her chest, and whispered to the empty room, "I don't know how to stop being your mother." But Marcus wasn't there to hear her. He hadn't been there for a long time. 3 months into Helen's depression, Claire showed up unannounced. Helen answered the door in sweatpants and a t-shirt she'd been wearing for 2 days, her hair unwashed, her eyes hollow. Claire took one look at her and said, "Get dressed. We're going for a drive." "Claire, I'm not—" "Get dressed, Helen, now." 20 minutes later, they were parked at the lake where they'd come as children, where Helen used to bring Marcus to feed the ducks. Claire turned off the car and looked at her sister. Really looked. "How long are you going to do this to yourself?" Helen stared out the window. "Do what?" "Disappear. Die while you're still breathing. You're letting them erase you, Helen. And I'm not going to sit by and watch it happen." "I don't know what you want me to do," Helen said, voice flat. "I can't make Marcus want me in his life." "No, you can't, but you can stop making your entire life about waiting for him to remember you exist." Helen turned to her sister, anger flashing for the first time in months. "He's my son, Claire. You don't have children. You don't understand what this feels like." Claire didn't flinch. "You're right. I don't have children, but I have a sister, and I'm watching her destroy herself over someone who's taking her for granted, and that I do understand." "I raised him alone," Helen whispered. "After David died, it was just me and Marcus. I gave him everything. I sacrificed everything. How did we get here?" "I don't know, honey. But I know this. You did nothing wrong. Marcus made choices. Nicole made choices. Those choices hurt you. But they're not a reflection of your worth as a mother or as a person. Then why does it feel like I failed?" "Because you loved him completely, and he's not loving you back the same way right now. That hurts. Of course it hurts. But Helen, you didn't fail. He's failing you." The words landed like a slap. Helen had spent months blaming herself, wondering what she'd done wrong, how she'd been too much, too clingy, too involved. But Claire was saying it wasn't her fault. "Your birthday was 3 weeks ago," Claire continued. "Marcus sent you a text 2 days late. A text, Helen, 2 days late." Helen had tried not to think about that. About sitting alone on her birthday, waiting for a call that never came. "I know," she whispered, "and you're still making excuses for him. Still waiting for him to wake up and realize what he's doing. But what if he doesn't, Helen? What if this is who he is now? What if Nicole has successfully convinced him that you're not important?" "Then I've lost him." "No," Claire said firmly. "Then he's lost you. There's a difference." Helen looked at her sister, confused. "You raised him to be a good man," Claire explained. "But somewhere along the way, he forgot that good men don't abandon their mothers. That good men don't take the people who love them for granted. That good men don't let their partners isolate them from family. So what am I supposed to do? Build a life that doesn't revolve around waiting for Marcus to value you. Love yourself enough to create something that's yours. Friendships, hobbies, purpose. Something that makes you worth coming back to when he finally pulls his head out of his ass. And if he never does? Claire grabbed Helen's hand. Then you'll have built a life anyway. A good life. One that doesn't require his permission or his presence to have meaning. Helen felt something crack open in her chest. Not breaking open, like the first thaw after a long winter. I don't know how to do that, she admitted. I don't know how to be anything other than Marcus's mother. Then it's time to learn, Claire said gently. Because you're Helen Porter. You're a sister, a friend, a librarian, a woman with her whole life ahead of her. You're so much more than the mother of a son who forgot how to see you. Helen started crying. Not the quiet, defeated tears she'd been crying for months, but something bigger. Anger mixed with grief, mixed with the tiniest spark of hope. I'm so tired, Claire. I know, but that's what depression does. It makes you tired, it makes you small, and we're not going to let you stay there. I don't even know where to start. Start small. Start with one thing that's just for you. Not for Marcus, not to make yourself more convenient or more likable. Just for you. Helen thought about the life she'd had before Marcus, before widowhood, before her entire identity became wrapped up in motherhood. She'd loved reading, painting. She'd had friends she'd let drift away, hobbies she'd abandoned. I used to paint, Helen said quietly. Watercolors. I loved it. Then start there, Claire said. Take a class. Buy some supplies. Do something that makes you remember you're alive. It won't fix anything with Marcus. No, Claire agreed, but it might fix something with you. And right now, that's more important. They sat by the lake for another hour, not talking, just being together. And for the first time in months, Helen felt like maybe, just maybe, she could survive this. She wouldn't be the same person she was before. But maybe that was okay. Maybe she could be someone new. Someone who existed beyond being Marcus's mother. Someone who loved her son but didn't lose herself in that love. It was a small hope. Fragile. Barely there. But it was something. The next day, Helen called in sick to work. Not because she was sick, but because she needed time. Time to begin the painful work of remembering who she was. She started with Marcus's room. For years, she'd kept it exactly as it was when he left for college. His posters, his trophies, his childhood books. A museum to a boy who no longer existed, waiting for visits that no longer came. Helen stood in the doorway, took a deep breath, and began. She took down the posters carefully, rolling them up and storing them in the closet. Not throwing them away, she wasn't ready for that, but putting them away, making space. She boxed up the trophies, the childhood toys, the memorabilia of a life that was over. And then she painted. She'd bought paint on the way home from the lake with Claire, a soft sage green that felt peaceful, calming, new. She painted over the blue walls Marcus had chosen at age 13, painted over the height marks they'd made each birthday, tracking his growth, painted over every reminder that this was Marcus's room. Each brushstroke felt like letting go. She cried while she painted, mourned while she transformed, but she didn't stop. When the room was done, walls sage green, curtains white and airy, furniture rearranged, it looked peaceful, welcoming, ready for guests. Not a shrine, not a museum, just a room. Helen stood in the doorway and felt something shift in her chest. It hurt, but it was a clean hurt, like setting a bone, painful but necessary. The next week, she signed up for a watercolor class at the community center. It had been advertised on the bulletin board at work for months. Helen had looked at it dozens of times, always thinking, someday. Someday she'd have time. Someday Marcus wouldn't need her. Someday she'd do something just for herself. Well, someday was here. And it looked nothing like she'd imagined. She paid the registration fee online before she could talk herself out of it. 8 weeks, every Thursday evening. Beginner watercolors. When the confirmation email came through, Helen felt a flutter of something that might have been excitement, or might have been terror, she wasn't sure which. But she was doing something. Taking action. Choosing herself. It was small. So small it felt almost meaningless. But Claire had said to start small. So Helen started. One painted room, one art class. One tiny step toward building a life that didn't revolve around waiting for her son to remember she existed. She couldn't know it yet, but these small steps would change everything. Marcus texted 3 days after Helen painted his room. "Hey Mom, how are you?" Helen stared at the message for a long time. In the past, she would have responded immediately. Would have poured out everything. How much she missed him. How hurt she was. How desperately she needed him to see her. Now, she simply typed, "I'm fine. How are you?" "Good, busy with work. Nicole and I might take a trip to Napa soon." "That sounds nice." "Yeah. Anyway, just checking in." "I appreciate that." And that was it. The conversation ended. No, "I miss you." No, "When can I see you?" No emotional spillage that Marcus wouldn't know what to do with. Just polite, distant, measured. It felt wrong, unnatural. Helen's every instinct screamed to reach out, to bridge the gap, to fight for connection. But she was learning something painful. You can't force someone to prioritize you. You can only control your own response. So Helen responded with the same energy Marcus gave. Brief, polite, distant. If he wanted more, he'd have to ask for it. He'd have to do the work. Helen was done carrying the entire relationship by herself. 2 weeks later, Marcus called. An actual phone call. Helen's heart jumped when she saw his name. She almost didn't answer, afraid of falling back into old patterns, of being too available, too eager, but she answered on the 4th ring. "Hi, Marcus." "Hey, Mom. I was just thinking about you, wondering what you're up to these days." Helen could have said nothing much, could have left the door open for him to fill her empty calendar. Instead, she said, "Actually, I started a watercolor class, and I'm redecorating the house, keeping busy." "Oh, that's great, Mom." He sounded surprised, like he'd expected her to be sitting by the phone waiting for him. "How are you and Nicole?" They talked for 8 minutes. Polite conversation, surface level, nothing deep or meaningful. When Marcus said he had to go, Helen felt relief more than disappointment. "Talk to you soon, Mom." "Take care, Marcus." After she hung up, Helen sat with the feeling. It hurt, this distance between them, but it hurt less than desperation had. She was learning to love him without needing him, to care about him without centering her entire life around him. It wasn't the relationship she'd wanted, but it was one she could survive. And for now, survival was enough. The first night of watercolor class, Helen almost didn't go. She sat in her car outside the community center for 10 minutes, watching other students filter in, telling herself she could just drive home. No one would know. She could get a refund. But then she thought about Claire's words. Build a life that doesn't revolve around waiting. So she got out of the car. The classroom was bright and welcoming. Large windows, easels arranged in a circle, soft music playing. About 12 other students were there, ranging in age from what looked like early 30s to mid-70s. Helen chose an easel near the back, unpacked her new supplies with shaking hands, and tried to look like she knew what she was doing. The instructor was a man in his 60s with kind eyes and paint-stained jeans. "I'm Thomas," he introduced himself. "Welcome to beginner watercolors. First rule, there's no such thing as a mistake in watercolor, only happy accidents. Second rule, we're here to play, not to be perfect. Third rule, we support each other. No judgment, just encouragement." Helen felt something in her chest loosen slightly. Thomas started with basics. How to mix colors, how to control water-to-paint ratio, how to let the paint flow instead of fighting it. "Watercolor teaches you to let go," he said, demonstrating a wash that bloomed across the paper in unexpected, beautiful ways. You can guide it, but you can't control it completely. The moment you try to force it, it rebels. Helen thought about Marcus, about trying to force connection, about how the harder she'd tried to hold on, the further he'd slipped away. Maybe she needed to learn to let go in more ways than one. Thomas had them practice simple techniques: wet on dry, color mixing. Helen's attempts were clumsy, the paint bleeding in ways she didn't intend, colors muddying together. But something about it was freeing. For 2 hours, she didn't think about Marcus, didn't think about Nicole or being replaced or her empty house. She just painted. Her first complete attempt at a landscape, a simple sunset over water, was objectively terrible. The sky was too dark. The water looked more like mud than reflection. The sun was lopsided. But she'd made it. With her own hands, her own choices, her own mistakes. "That's beautiful," said a voice beside her. Helen looked up to see a woman around her age, maybe early 60s, with silver hair and a warm smile. "It's awful," Helen said, but she was smiling. "It's yours," the woman corrected. "That makes it beautiful. I'm Ruth." "Helen? First time painting? First time doing anything just for myself in I don't know how long," Helen admitted. Ruth nodded knowingly. "I started painting 6 months ago, after my husband died. I was going crazy sitting at home, talking to the walls. Figured I might as well try something new before I completely lost my mind." "I'm a widow too," Helen said softly. "It's been almost 20 years, but I remember that feeling." They talked while cleaning their brushes, discovering they lived in the same neighborhood, had similar taste in books, both loved mystery novels and British television. "You should sit with me next week," Ruth said. "I'll share my secret technique." "You have a technique?" "Not really, but I have wine hidden in my water bottle, and that helps the paintings look better." Helen laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. As she drove home that night, supplies in the back seat, she felt different. Lighter. Not healed. Healing would take much longer, but less heavy. She'd spent 2 hours being Helen the painter instead of Helen the abandoned mother, and it had felt good. Over the following weeks, Thursday nights became Helen's favorite part of the week. She and Ruth always arrived early, setting up side by side, chatting about their week. Ruth had a wicked sense of humor and a refreshing bluntness that Helen appreciated. "My daughter called last night," Ruth shared one evening. "Lives in California, visits twice a year if I'm lucky. Told me I should stay busy, so I don't get lonely. As if painting pictures of lopsided trees is going to fill the daughter-shaped hole in my life." Helen understood completely. She met the other regulars too. Martin, a retired high school teacher in his early 60s who was rediscovering creativity after 40 years of grading papers. Lisa, a divorced woman Helen's age whose ex-husband had left her for someone younger. "My kids sided with their father," Lisa shared one night over coffee after class. "Said I was being dramatic about the affair, that I should just move on. So I did. Moved on from them too." She'd said it with dark humor, but Helen heard the pain underneath. They started staying after class, the 4 of them, getting coffee at the cafe next door, talking about everything and nothing. Books, politics, failed recipes, terrible dates Ruth had been on. Helen found herself opening up in small pieces. She mentioned having a son, that they weren't as close as they used to be. She didn't dump her whole story on them, but she didn't pretend everything was fine either. "My daughter barely speaks to me since she got married," Lisa said when Helen mentioned Marcus. "Her husband doesn't like me, says I'm too opinionated, so she chose him. I get it, but it still hurts like hell." "Does it get easier?" Helen asked. "No," Lisa said honestly, "but you get stronger. You build a life that doesn't need their approval to have meaning." Helen appreciated the honesty. Not toxic positivity. Not everything happens for a reason. Just truth. This hurts, and you survive it anyway. These people, virtual strangers weeks ago, were becoming her support system. They saw her. Not as Marcus's mother. Not as David's widow. Just as Helen. A woman learning to paint. To laugh. To exist beyond the roles that had defined her. One evening, after a particularly good session where Helen's painting had actually turned out decent, Martin raised his coffee cup. To new beginnings. To finding ourselves, Ruth added. To surviving our children, Lisa said wryly. Helen raised her cup. To choosing ourselves. They clinked cups, and Helen felt something she hadn't felt in years. Belonging. Not because of who she was related to, but because of who she was. 3 months into painting class, Claire came for a weekend visit. She walked into Helen's house and stopped in the doorway looking around. You redecorated. I did, Helen said, a hint of pride in her voice. The house looked different, not drastically. Helen couldn't afford a complete overhaul, but noticeably. She'd rearranged furniture, bought new throw pillows in jewel tones instead of neutral beige, hung some of her watercolor paintings on the walls. The shrine to Marcus had been dismantled. His photos were still there, but mixed with photos of Helen with friends, with Claire, with her parents who'd passed years ago. A life broader than just motherhood. Helen, you look different, Claire said, studying her sister. Different how? Lighter. More you. What's been happening? Helen made tea and told Claire about painting class, about Ruth and Martin and Lisa, about learning to create something with her own hands, about Thursday nights that gave her something to look forward to. I'm proud of you, Claire said, eyes shining with tears. For what? Learning to paint badly? For choosing yourself. For building this. I know it's not easy. It wasn't easy. Some days Helen still ached with missing Marcus. Still checked her phone hoping for messages that didn't come. Still had moments where the grief hit her like a wave. But she also had moments now where she forgot to check her phone. Where hours passed without thinking about Marcus. Where she laughed genuinely and felt present in her own life. She'd started making other changes too. Small ones that added up. She'd signed up for a book club at the library, something she'd been meaning to do for years. She went to see a movie alone for the first time in her life and discovered she liked it. She said no to covering a shift at work without apologizing or over-explaining. She started dating. Casually, nothing serious. A coworker had set her up with Peter, a kind man who owned the local hardware store. They'd been on 3 coffee dates, and while Helen wasn't sure there was romantic potential, she enjoyed his company. He made her laugh. He listened. He didn't need her to be anyone other than herself. One Saturday, Ruth invited Helen to a weekend art show in a nearby city. Road trip. Just us. We'll look at art, eat too much food, stay in a cheap hotel. What do you say? Helen's first instinct was to say no. What if Marcus needed her? What if he called? Then she thought, what if he doesn't? What if she waited around for a call that never came and missed out on actually living? Yes, Helen said. Let's do it. That weekend, looking at art with Ruth, eating at small restaurants, laughing in a hotel room about terrible paintings they'd seen, Helen felt something she hadn't felt in years. Free. She was 58 years old, and for the first time since David died, she felt like more than just a role. She was Helen, artist, friend, sister, woman, and that was enough. When Marcus's birthday approached, his 30th, Helen faced a choice. In the past, she'd have spent days preparing, cooking his favorite meal, buying him multiple thoughtful gifts, calling first thing in the morning to sing happy birthday. This year, she did something different. She sent a card, a nice one, thoughtful, with a brief handwritten message. Happy 30th birthday, Marcus. I hope this year brings you everything you're looking for. Love, Mom. She sent a gift card to his favorite restaurant. Not impersonal, but not the carefully chosen presents she used to agonize over. And she didn't call. She went about her day, worked at the library, went to her book club, had dinner with Peter at a new Thai place downtown. Marcus's birthday came and went, and Helen didn't organize it, didn't center it, didn't make it her responsibility to celebrate him when he'd made it clear he didn't want her involved. 2 days later, Marcus texted, "Thanks for the gift, Mom." Just that. No, I missed your call. No, why didn't you call? Just, thanks for the gift, Mom. Helen stared at the text for a long time, feeling something settle in her chest. Hurt. Yes, but also strength. She'd given what she could without destroying herself. She'd loved him from a distance that didn't break her heart. She typed back, "You're welcome. I hope you had a good day." And she meant it. She hoped he was happy, but she was no longer willing to sacrifice her peace to prove her love. She was learning, slowly, painfully, that loving someone sometimes meant letting them go, even when that someone was your son. Even when letting go felt like dying. She was learning to survive it anyway. 8 months into her new life, Helen had found a rhythm that, while not perfect, was sustainable. Her Mondays were quiet work days at the library, helping patrons and losing herself in books. Tuesdays, she had dinner with Peter. They'd settled into a comfortable companionship. Not quite romantic, but warm and steady. Wednesdays were for herself, painting in her newly converted spare room, watching her favorite shows, reading. Thursdays were painting class with Ruth, Martin, and Lisa. Fridays were book club. Saturdays, she'd started volunteering at a literacy program for adults learning to read. Sundays were for Claire or Ruth, or sometimes just herself. She'd even started teaching a beginner's watercolor workshop once a month at the community center. 12 students who looked to her for guidance, who saw her as knowledgeable, capable, worthy of respect. It still felt strange to be called Helen instead of Mom. To be valued for skills beyond mothering, to have an identity separate from Marcus, but it was getting easier. Marcus still texted occasionally, brief messages that Helen responded to with equal brevity. They'd fallen into a pattern of shallow check-ins that satisfied neither of them but was all Marcus seemed willing to offer. Helen had stopped hoping for more, stopped imagining reconciliation, stopped checking her phone desperately. She'd learned to live with the ache, to carry it without letting it consume her. She thought about Marcus often. Of course she did. You don't stop loving your child just because they've stopped seeing you. But she'd learned to love him without needing him to love her back in the way she wanted. It was a quieter love, less desperate, more sustainable. And for the first time in over a year, Helen was genuinely okay. Not happy in the way she'd once been happy. Not whole in the way she'd once felt whole. But okay. Functioning. Building something that belonged to her. Her house felt like a home instead of a museum. Her calendar felt full instead of empty. Her life felt lived instead of just endured. She was, against all odds, surviving. She'd even started to believe she might actually be okay long term, that she could build a good life even if Marcus never truly came back to her. And then, on a Tuesday night in late October, her phone rang at 11:47 p.m. Marcus's name lit up the screen, and everything changed. Helen's heart leapt into her throat. Marcus never called this late. Something was wrong. She answered immediately. "Marcus, what's wrong?" The sound that came through the phone stopped her heart. Crying. Deep, wrenching sobs. "Marcus, baby, what happened? Are you hurt?" "Mom." His voice broke completely. "Mom, I don't know what to do." Helen was already moving, turning on lights, looking for her keys. "Where are you? Are you safe?" "I'm at a hotel. Mom, Nicole wants a divorce." Helen stopped moving. "What?" "She's been having an affair for 6 months with someone from her firm. She told me tonight, told me she wants out, told me I need to be out of the house by the end of the week." The words came out in gasping bursts between sobs. Helen's maternal instinct roared to life, drowning out everything else. The hurt, the distance, the months of being ignored. Her son was in pain. Nothing else mattered. "Where's the hotel?" "I'm coming to get you." "No, Mom, you don't have to." "Marcus Porter, you tell me where you are right now." He gave her the address, a cheap motel 40 minutes away. Helen grabbed her purse and was out the door within minutes. The drive felt eternal. Her mind raced. Marcus was hurt. Her baby was hurt. The details, Nicole, the affair, the divorce, those would come later. Right now, she just needed to get to her son. She found him in room 237, sitting on the edge of the bed in wrinkled clothes, his eyes red and swollen, looking younger than his 30 years. Looking like the 12-year-old boy who'd cried in her arms when his father died. "Mom." he whispered and broke down completely. Helen crossed the room and pulled him into her arms. Marcus sobbed against her shoulder, huge shaking cries that seemed to come from somewhere deep and broken. "I've got you," Helen murmured, stroking his hair like she had when he was small. "I've got you, baby. You're okay. You're going to be okay." "I'm sorry," Marcus gasped. "I'm so sorry, Mom. For everything, for disappearing, for treating you like you didn't matter, for being such a terrible son." "Shh. We'll talk about that later. Right now, let's just get through tonight." She held him while he cried himself out, made him drink water, got him to lie down, sat on the edge of the bed, stroking his hair until his breathing evened out and he fell into exhausted sleep. Only then did Helen allow herself to feel the complexity of the moment. Relief that he'd called her. That when everything fell apart, she was still the person he turned to. Anger that it took a crisis. That he only needed her when he had nowhere else to go. Fear that this was temporary. That once he was okay, he'd disappear again. And underneath everything else, the fierce, unwavering love of a mother for her child, no matter what he'd done, no matter how much he'd hurt her. He was her son, and he needed her, so she stayed. Marcus stirred around 3 a.m., disoriented. "Mom? I'm here," Helen said from the chair by the window where she'd been keeping watch. "You stayed." "Of course I stayed." Marcus sat up, rubbing his face. "What time is it?" "A little after 3. How are you feeling?" "Like my life is over." He said it flatly, without emotion, which somehow felt worse than the crying. Helen moved to sit beside him on the bed. "Tell me what happened. All of it." Marcus took a shaky breath and told her everything. How he'd noticed Nicole being distant for months. How she'd been working late, taking mysterious phone calls, being secretive with her phone. How he'd convinced himself he was paranoid. Until tonight, when she'd sat him down and confessed. 6 months with a partner at her firm. She was in love. She wanted out. And because the house was solely in her name, because Marcus hadn't contributed enough to the down payment, she'd said he needed to leave. "I have nothing, Mom," Marcus whispered. "We have a joint checking account, but she makes 3 times what I make and she's already frozen it. All our friends are really her friends, or couples who'll side with her. Her family won't even look at me. I called her mother tonight to try to talk to her, and Patricia hung up on me." Helen felt a flash of vindictive satisfaction at that, then immediately felt ashamed. "Where were you going to go?" Helen asked gently. "I don't know. I didn't know who to call. Everyone I thought I could count on. They're all connected to Nicole somehow." "What about your friends from college?" Marcus looked ashamed. "I lost touch with most of them. Nicole didn't like them. Said they were immature, so I stopped calling, stopped making plans, and eventually they stopped reaching out too." Helen's heart broke. She'd watched this happen. Watched Nicole isolate Marcus from everyone who'd loved him before her. But she'd said nothing. Because Marcus had seemed happy. Because she'd been afraid of being labeled the overbearing mother-in-law. "Marcus, why did you call me?" He looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. "Because you're my mom. And even though I've been the worst son in the world, even though I abandoned you and ignored you and took you for granted, I knew you'd answer. I knew you'd come." The words hung between them. Helen felt everything at once, love and anger and grief and relief and resentment and tenderness. She wanted to scream at him. "Yes, I'm your mother, but where were you for the past 2 years? Where were you on my birthday? Where were you when I needed you?" But she also wanted to hold him and fix everything and make his pain go away. The war inside her was exhausting. "Come home with me," Helen heard herself say. "You can stay in the guest room until you figure out what's next." "Really?" Marcus looked stunned. "After everything?" Helen looked at her son, this man she'd raised, who'd broken her heart, who was now shattered himself. "You're my son," she said simply. "That doesn't change just because you hurt me." But even as she said it, even as she offered him refuge, part of Helen was screaming, "What are you doing? You just built boundaries. You just learned to protect yourself. And now you're inviting him back in?" Marcus would take her help, would let her fix his life. And then what? Would he disappear again the moment things were better? Was she setting herself up for another devastation? Helen didn't have answers to these questions, but she knew one thing. She couldn't turn away her son when he was broken, even if helping him might break her all over again. "Come on," she said, standing up. "Let's get your things and go home." Marcus stood and hugged her. Really hugged her. Tight and desperate. "Thank you, Mom. I don't deserve you." "No," Helen said quietly. "You don't. But we'll talk about that later. Right now, let's just get through tonight." They gathered his few belongings from the hotel room and drove back to Helen's house in the pre-dawn darkness. Marcus fell asleep in the passenger seat, exhausted and broken. Helen drove and wondered what she'd just done. Wondered if this was an act of love or an act of self-destruction. Wondered if there was even a difference. Helen pulled into her driveway as the sun was starting to rise. Marcus woke as she turned off the car, looking disoriented. For a moment, Helen saw recognition dawn on his face. This house, this driveway, this home he'd grown up in and then abandoned. "I haven't been here in..." Marcus trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. 14 months, Helen said quietly. "It's been 14 months since you've been to my house, Marcus." He looked stricken. "Has it really been that long?" "Yes." They sat in the car for a moment, the weight of that number settling between them. Finally, Helen said, "Come on, let's get you inside." She led him into the house. Marcus looked around, noticing the changes, the rearranged furniture, the new colors, the paintings on the walls. "You redecorated." "I did. A lot has changed." She showed him to the guest room, the room that used to be his, now painted sage green with neutral furniture and guest room anonymity. Marcus stood in the doorway, looking lost. Is this my room?" "It's the guest room," Helen corrected gently. "Your room doesn't exist anymore, Marcus. I couldn't keep it as a shrine forever." He nodded, understanding. "I'm sorry, Mom." "I know you are, but sorry isn't enough. We both know that." "What do I need to do?" Helen looked at her broken son and felt her heart split in two. "Right now? Sleep. We'll figure out the rest later." Marcus set his bags down and turned to her. "Mom, can I just hug you?" Helen hesitated for only a second before stepping into his arms. Marcus held her tight, crying again, whispering apologies into her hair. And Helen held her son, loving him desperately, while simultaneously protecting the part of her heart that had learned to exist without him. She didn't know how this would end. Didn't know if she was making a terrible mistake. But for now, her son was home. Broken and hurting, but home, and Helen would do what mothers do. She'd love him through the crisis. What happened after that was anyone's guess. The first few days of Marcus living in Helen's house were strange. They moved around each other like polite strangers. Careful, distant, overly courteous, Marcus slept until noon most days, exhausted from emotional devastation and the Ambien Helen found in his bag. She'd go to work at the library, come home to find him on the couch, scrolling through his phone with hollow eyes. "How was your day?" she'd ask. "Fine. Yours?" "Fine." Conversations didn't go deeper. Both of them were afraid. Marcus afraid of saying the wrong thing and losing his refuge. Helen afraid of demanding more than he could give and destroying the fragile peace between them. Helen made dinner every night. Simple meals. Nothing elaborate. She no longer cooked Marcus's favorites automatically. She made what she felt like making, and he ate it gratefully, thanking her like a guest instead of a son. "This is really good, Mom. Thank you." "You're welcome." Then silence, the TV filling the void between them. On the fourth night, Helen had plans. Painting class with Ruth and the others. She'd considered canceling, not wanting to leave Marcus alone in his state. But then she remembered Claire's words. Build a life that doesn't revolve around waiting for him. So she went. "I'll be back around 9, she told Marcus. "There's leftover lasagna in the fridge if you get hungry." Marcus looked surprised. You're going out? I have painting class on Thursdays. I've had it for 8 months now. Oh, right. Of course. Have fun. When Helen came home, loose and happy from an evening of painting and laughter with her friends, Marcus was still on the couch. How was it? He asked. Really good. I'm working on a landscape that's actually starting to look like something. That's great, Mom. Another silence. Helen wanted to scream, talk to me, really talk to me. Tell me what you're feeling. Ask me how I've been. Acknowledge what you did to me. But Marcus looked so fragile, so broken that Helen swallowed her words. Not yet. He wasn't ready yet. So they continued their careful dance. Polite, distant, two people who shared DNA and a house but currently shared very little else. Helen went about her life. Work, book club, dates with Peter, who she'd told about Marcus staying with her and who'd been understanding. Weekend volunteering, monthly painting workshops. Marcus existed. Checked his phone constantly. Ignored calls from Nicole. Slept too much. Barely ate. On day 7, Helen came home from work to find Marcus sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the wall. She set down her bag and sat across from him. Marcus, we need to talk. He looked up, fear in his eyes. Are you kicking me out? No, but we need to actually talk. She gestured between them. This polite stranger routine isn't working. You're my son, I love you. But I'm also furious with you. And we need to address that. Marcus's face crumpled. I know I've been terrible. I just don't know where to start. Start with the truth, Helen said. Tell me what happened. Not just with Nicole. With us. With why you disappeared. Marcus took a shaky breath. And finally, he started talking. Not the careful, edited version he might have given before, but the real, raw, painful truth. Nicole didn't like you from the beginning, he said, not meeting Helen's eyes. I told myself she just needed time to warm up, but it got worse after we got engaged. He told Helen about the constant comments, how Helen was too involved, how it was unhealthy for a grown man to be so close to his mother, how Marcus needed to cut the apron strings if he wanted a successful marriage. She'd get upset if I called you, said I prioritized you over her, so I started calling less. And she'd get upset if I made plans with you, said I was choosing you over our relationship, so I stopped making plans. Helen listened, her heart breaking and hardening simultaneously. After we got married, it got worse. Nicole said your house was depressing, that spending time with you made me regress. She said healthy couples prioritized each other, not their parents, you see. And you believed her? Helen's voice was tight. I didn't know what to believe, Marcus said, finally meeting her eyes. She sounded so sure, and she'd point to her relationship with her parents. They saw them constantly, had dinner every week. But that was different, she said, because her parents knew boundaries. Meaning I didn't? Meaning you existed. That was your crime, Mom. You existed and I loved you. That was too much for Nicole. Marcus told her about the birthday party, how Patricia had organized it and specifically told Nicole not to invite Helen. She said it would be awkward having both mothers there, that we should keep families separate. And you agreed to that? I didn't know she hadn't invited you until after. And by then, God, Mom, I was so ashamed I'd let it get to that point, so I just didn't say anything. Hoped you wouldn't find out. I found out. I know. And I lied about it. Told you it was last minute. Told myself you wouldn't care that much. How could you possibly think I wouldn't care? Marcus's voice broke. Because caring would have meant admitting what I'd become, what I'd let Nicole turn me into. A man who abandons his mother. A man who chooses his wife's approval over the woman who raised him alone. A man who's too weak to set boundaries with his wife but perfectly capable of cutting off his own mother. Tears streamed down his face. I knew I was hurting you. Every missed call, every short text, every holiday I chose Nicole's family over you. I knew. But I told myself it was what I had to do. That this was what being a good husband looked like. And now? Helen asked quietly. Now I realize I wasn't being a good husband. I was being controlled, isolated. Nicole didn't love me, Mom. She loved the idea of me. Successful, moldable, someone she could shape into her perfect partner. The real me. The man who loved his mother, who was content with a modest career, who valued family over ambition. I was never enough for her. He looked at Helen with devastated eyes. She told me I was boring, that I wasn't ambitious enough, that I'd never be the man she needed me to be. And you know what the worst part is? I believed her. I spent 3 years believing I was fundamentally flawed, that loving my mother was a weakness, that being kind instead of ruthless made me a failure. Marcus, I destroyed the one relationship in my life that was actually unconditional. You loved me no matter what. And Nicole? She loved me only if I was exactly who she wanted me to be. And I chose her. The words hung between them, heavy with regret. Helen felt tears sliding down her own face. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you let me help? Because I was ashamed. Because admitting Nicole was manipulating me would mean admitting I'd hurt you for nothing. That I'd thrown away our relationship for a woman who never really loved me. They sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Helen said, "You hurt me, Marcus. More than I can fully express. You made me feel invisible, worthless, like everything I'd done for you meant nothing." I know. My birthday, you texted me 2 days late. I know. Your wedding. I felt like a stranger. I know, Mom. I know. Then why? Helen's voice rose. Why did you do it? Because I was weak, Marcus whispered. Because I thought if I could just be good enough for Nicole, if I could just make her happy, she'd love me the way you love me. Unconditionally. Completely. But that's not how she loved. And I lost everything trying to earn something that was never available. Helen stood up, pacing, trying to process everything Marcus had just told her. Part of her wanted to comfort him. To say it was okay. He'd been manipulated, she forgave him. But another part of her, the part that had spent 8 months learning to value herself, knew that easy forgiveness would be a betrayal of her own healing. Marcus, she said carefully, I understand that Nicole manipulated you. I understand that she isolated you and made you doubt yourself and your relationships. I get all of that. She turned to face him. But you still made choices. You chose to stop calling. You chose to skip holidays with me. You chose to exclude me from your life. Nicole may have pushed you, but you're a grown man. You could have said no. Marcus nodded, tears streaming. You're right. I spent 2 years disappearing from your life. Do you have any idea what that felt like? To go from being your best friend, your person, to being an afterthought? To see photos of your birthday party? Both families invited except me? Mom, I cried for 3 days after that. Helen continued, her voice shaking. I felt like I'd lost you. Like you'd died, except you were still alive, just done with me. Do you know I repainted your room because I couldn't keep waiting in a shrine for a son who'd moved on? I'm so sorry, Marcus sobbed. I'm so fucking sorry, Mom. Sorry isn't enough if nothing changes, Helen said, and she heard Claire's voice in her own words. I can't go back to how things were, Marcus. I won't. I spent 8 months building a life that doesn't revolve around waiting for you to remember I exist. I can't destroy that progress, even for you. I don't want you to, Marcus said. Mom, I want to be a better son. I want to deserve you, but I don't know how. Helen sat back down, exhausted. Here's what I need, she said. Honesty. Real honesty. Not the polite surface stuff we've been doing. Consistency. Not just when you need me, but ongoing. And respect for my life. I have painting class and book club and friends and a man I'm seeing. I have a life now, Marcus. And if you want to be part of it, you need to respect that it exists. I do. I will, Mom. I promise. Don't promise, Helen said. Just do it. Actions matter more than words. Show me. Don't tell me. Marcus nodded. Fair. More than fair. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Marcus asked quietly, Can I hug you? Helen hesitated. Part of her wanted to maintain distance to protect herself, but he was still her son, broken and flawed and human. Yes, she said. Marcus crossed the room and wrapped his arms around her. I'm going to do better. I'm going to be the son you deserve. I hope so, Helen whispered, because I can't survive losing you again. That night marked a shift. The polite stranger routine ended. They started actually talking about the divorce, about Helen's life, about Marcus's need to rebuild himself. I think I need therapy, Marcus admitted. I'm a mess, Mom. I don't know who I am anymore. Then let's find you a therapist, Helen said. And Marcus, I'm proud of you for recognizing that. The next morning, Marcus got up before noon for the first time since arriving. He made coffee, started looking for therapists, asked Helen about her upcoming painting class. Can I come? He asked. I'd like to see this part of your life. Helen felt a flutter of hope. Really? Really, if that's okay? It's more than okay. They were far from fixed. Trust would take time to rebuild. Helen's hurt wouldn't heal overnight. But they were talking, really talking, and that was a start. 2 weeks after moving in with Helen, Marcus had his first therapy appointment. He'd found Dr. Lisa Chen, a therapist who specialized in codependency and family dynamics. Helen drove him to the first appointment, waiting in the car, nervous for him. When he came out an hour later, Marcus looked emotionally wrung out. How was it? Helen asked gently. Hard. Really hard. But good, I think. Over the following weeks, therapy became Marcus's anchor. He went twice a week, working through layers of manipulation, poor boundaries, and fear of abandonment. He started sharing things with Helen, carefully, not dumping his entire therapy session on her, but opening up in ways that felt healthy. Dr. Chen says I've been operating from a scarcity mindset, he said one evening over dinner. Like love is limited and I have to earn it. So when Nicole demanded I prove my love by cutting you off, I did it because I was terrified of losing her. And now? Helen asked. Now I'm learning that real love doesn't demand you sacrifice other relationships, that healthy partners want you to have strong family bonds. He told her about recognizing patterns from his father's death. Dr. Chen says losing Dad when I was 12 created this wound. I became hypervigilant about making people happy so they wouldn't leave. And Nicole, she exploited that. Every time I displeased her, she'd threaten to leave, and I'd panic and do whatever she wanted. Helen listened, heartbroken for the scared little boy inside her grown son who'd never properly healed from losing his father. Marcus, I wish you'd talked to me about this years ago. I didn't know how. And Nicole made me feel like needing my mother was pathetic. But Dr. Chen says it's actually healthy, that adult children who maintain good relationships with parents tend to have stronger marriages. Unless they marry someone who feels threatened by it, Helen added. Yeah, Dr. Chen was pretty blunt about that. Said Nicole showed classic signs of a narcissist who needed to be the center of my universe. Marcus was doing the work, not just in therapy, but in examining himself honestly. He started a journal. He read books on healthy relationships and boundaries. He stopped checking his phone obsessively for Nicole's messages. Helen watched him transform slowly, painfully, genuinely. And she felt hope. Cautious, fragile hope, that maybe they really could rebuild. 3 weeks after Marcus moved in, Helen invited him to painting class. You really want me there? Marcus asked, surprised. I do. I want you to meet the people who helped me survive losing you. Thursday evening, they arrived at the community center together. Ruth, Martin, and Lisa looked up with interest as Helen entered with the younger man. Everyone, this is my son Marcus. Marcus, this is Ruth, Martin, and Lisa. Thomas, the instructor, set Marcus up with supplies. First rule, there are no mistakes, only happy accidents. Marcus laughed nervously. I should warn you, I have zero artistic talent. Perfect, Ruth said with a wink. Neither do the rest of us. You'll fit right in. They spent the evening painting autumn landscapes, trees aflame with red and gold, crisp blue skies, the promise of change. Marcus's attempt was objectively terrible. His trees looked drunk. His sky had weird streaks. His color mixing created muddy browns instead of vibrant oranges. But he was laughing, really laughing, unselfconsciously, at his own terrible technique. Helen watched him joke with Ruth about whose painting was worse, listen to Martin's advice about brushstrokes, compliment Lisa's actually quite good landscape. This was her son. The real Marcus, not the hollow man Nicole had been creating. Goofy, self-deprecating, warm, present. After class, they all went for coffee at the cafe next door. "So you're the famous Marcus," Ruth said, studying him with shrewd eyes. "Your mother talks about you sometimes." Marcus looked uncomfortable. "I'm sure she does." "She's proud of you," Ruth continued, "but she's also been healing from some hurt. I assume you know about that." "Ruth," Helen warned. "No, it's okay," Marcus said. "She's right. I hurt my mom badly. I disappeared from her life because my wife demanded it, and I was too weak to say no. I'm trying to do better now." Ruth nodded approvingly. "Well, you're here. That's something." Later, driving home, Marcus said, "I like your friends. They're real." "They are. They've been there for me when I had no one else. Because I wasn't there." "Yes." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Mom, can I ask you something? That guy at the coffee shop, Peter. Are you dating him?" Helen had wondered when Marcus would notice. Peter had waved hello when they'd entered the cafe, and Helen had introduced him briefly. "We've been seeing each other, casually, nothing serious, but yes, we're dating." "How long?" "About 6 months." Marcus processed this. "I'm glad. I mean it. You deserve companionship. Happiness, someone who treats you well." "Thank you." "Is it weird that I'm a little jealous?" Marcus admitted, with a self-deprecating laugh. "Like, I abandoned you, but some possessive part of me doesn't like the idea of you needing someone else." Helen appreciated the honesty. "That's natural. But Marcus, I can't sit around waiting for you to decide I'm worth your time. I need a life. And if that life includes someone who's kind to me and makes me laugh, that's not a betrayal of you." "I know. And I'm working on that possessive reaction." Dr. Chen would have a field day with this conversation. They both laughed, and Helen felt something ease between them. These small moments, painting together, meeting her friends, honest conversations, were stitching their relationship back together. Slowly, one careful thread at a time. Saturday morning, Helen had her monthly watercolor workshop to teach. Marcus asked if he could come. "Not to participate, just to watch. I want to see you teach." Helen agreed, touched. 12 students arrived, ranging from teenagers to retirees, all eager to learn. Helen transformed in front of Marcus's eyes. She wasn't just mom anymore. She was confident, knowledgeable, encouraging. She demonstrated techniques with practiced ease, offered feedback with kindness, made every student feel capable regardless of skill level. "Remember," she told the class, "watercolor is about letting go of control. The paint will do what it wants. Your job is to guide it, not force it. The moment you try to control it completely, it rebels." Marcus watched his mother, really watched her, for maybe the first time in his adult life. She was good at this. Really good. Natural and warm and completely in her element. When had she learned to paint? How had he not known she was teaching classes? What else had he missed while he was busy letting Nicole convince him his mother was irrelevant? After the class, a young woman approached Helen. She looked about 25 with nervous energy. "Helen, can I talk to you for a minute?" "Of course, Sarah. What's up?" I needed to thank you for more than just painting lessons. My mom and I haven't spoken in 3 years. She and my husband don't get along, and I chose him. But watching you, listening to your advice about balance and boundaries, I called her yesterday. We talked for 2 hours. Helen's eyes filled with tears. "Sarah, I'm so glad." "You remind me what a good mother looks like," Sarah said. "My mom isn't perfect, but she loves me. And I've been punishing her for not loving my husband the way I wanted her to. But you've taught me that mothers and daughters can have different relationships with the same person. That's okay. They hugged, and Marcus felt his throat tighten. His mother had been teaching, not just painting, but life lessons, helping other people navigate the exact pain he'd caused her. After Sarah left, Marcus approached Helen. Mom, that was incredible. You're an amazing teacher. Helen looked surprised. Thank you. How long have you been doing this? The monthly workshops? About 6 months. 6 months. While he'd been busy being Nicole's perfect husband, his mother had built this entire life. Friends, students, purpose, meaning. I'm really proud of you, Marcus said and meant it completely. Thank you, sweetheart. That means a lot. That evening, Marcus couldn't stop thinking about what he'd witnessed. His mother, who he'd relegated to just mom in his mind, was a whole person with skills and passions and people who valued her. He'd been so busy seeing her through Nicole's dismissive eyes that he'd forgotten to see her at all. Can I ask you something? Marcus said over dinner. Always. When did you start painting? Helen smiled. After you disappeared from my life. After I realized I'd spent years being only your mother and needed to remember who Helen was. The words weren't accusatory, just honest. And Marcus felt the weight of them settle in his chest. His absence had forced his mother to rebuild herself. She'd thrived not because of him, but in spite of him. And now he was back, hoping to be part of this life she'd created without him. He had a lot of work to do to earn that place. A month into living with Helen, Marcus started talking about his marriage more openly, not defensively, but reflectively, examining the relationship with the clarity distance and therapy had provided. I think I loved the idea of Nicole more than I loved Nicole herself, he admitted one evening. She was successful, confident, ambitious, everything I thought I should want. But she didn't actually like me. The real me. What do you mean? She was constantly trying to change me. My career wasn't impressive enough. My hobbies were boring. My friends weren't sophisticated enough. And my relationship with you? He trailed off. What did she say about me? Helen asked. Marcus hesitated, then decided honesty was more important than protecting Helen's feelings. She said you were emotionally manipulative, that you used guilt to control me, that you couldn't accept I was an adult with my own life. Helen flinched but said, Do you think that was true? Marcus looked at his mother, who'd taken him in when he had nowhere to go, who'd set boundaries even while helping him, who'd built a life that didn't revolve around him. No, I think Nicole saw any woman who had influence in my life as a threat. She needed to be the only important woman. My mother, my female friends, even female coworkers. She found problems with all of them. That's not healthy. I know that now. Dr. Chen has been helping me see how isolated I became. Nicole systematically removed every support system I had until she was all I had left. Did you ever push back? Marcus looked ashamed. Not enough. I'd try sometimes, tentatively. I'd say, Can we visit my mom this weekend? And Nicole would get cold, distant, wouldn't talk to me for days. And I'd panic and apologize and promise to do better. That's emotional manipulation, Marcus. I know. But in the moment, it just felt like I was failing as a husband. Like if I could just be better, she wouldn't need to punish me. Helen reached across the table and took his hand. That's not love, sweetheart. Love doesn't punish. Love doesn't demand you erase other relationships. Love doesn't make you feel small. I'm starting to understand that. But Mom, I need to know, did I damage us too badly to fix? Is what I did forgivable? Helen considered the question seriously. I don't know yet, she said honestly. You hurt me deeply, Marcus, and trust isn't rebuilt overnight. But I see you doing the work. I see you trying. That matters. But it's not enough? It's a start. We'll see where it goes from here. On the third day of Marcus meeting with Nicole, Helen called Claire in a panic. He's going back to her. I can see it happening. After everything, after therapy and growth and rebuilding our relationship, he's going to choose her again. Claire listened to Helen's spiral, then said calmly, "And what will you do if he does?" "I don't know. I can't go through this again, Claire. I can't watch him disappear into her orbit again. I can't survive being erased a second time." "Then don't." Helen stopped pacing. "What?" "If Marcus chooses to go back to Nicole, and if she demands he cut you off again, you don't have to accept that. You can love him and still protect yourself." "But he's my son." "Yes. And you're a person with worth and dignity who deserves to be treated with respect. Even by your son. Especially by your son." Helen sank onto her bed, feeling tears start. "I just got him back, Claire. We were rebuilding. It was hard, but we were doing it. And now Nicole snaps her fingers and he's ready to throw it all away?" "You don't know that yet," Claire said gently. "He might surprise you. He might choose differently this time. And if he doesn't, then you survive it. Like you survived it before. You have your painting, your friends, your life. You're not the same woman you were 2 years ago, Helen. You're stronger now." "I don't feel stronger. I feel terrified." "That's because you love him. But love doesn't mean letting yourself be destroyed. You can love Marcus and still say, 'I will not be invisible in your life again. I will not accept being treated as disposable. I deserve better than that.'" Helen wiped her eyes. What if saying that means losing him? Then he was already lost. You can't lose something you don't really have. The words were harsh but true. Helen had learned over the past months that she couldn't force Marcus to value her. She could only value herself and hope he'd rise to meet that standard. "I'm scared," Helen whispered. "I know, but you're also capable. You've already proven you can survive without him. Now you just need to remember that you can survive whatever choice he makes." After hanging up with Claire, Helen sat alone in her room, thinking. She'd taken Marcus in when he was broken. She'd supported him through therapy, through job hunting, through the painful work of rebuilding himself. She'd done everything a mother could do, but she couldn't make his choices for him. And she couldn't destroy herself trying to keep him if he chose to leave again. Whatever Marcus decided, Helen would have to find a way to survive it. She'd done it before. She could do it again. Even if the thought of it made her want to curl up and die. On the third day of Marcus meeting with Nicole, Helen called Claire in a panic. "He's going back to her. I can see it happening. After everything, after therapy and growth and rebuilding our relationship, he's going to choose her again." Claire listened to Helen's spiral, then said calmly, "And what will you do if he does?" "I don't know. I can't go through this again, Claire. I can't watch him disappear into her orbit again. I can't survive being erased a second time." "Then don't." Helen stopped pacing. "What?" "If Marcus chooses to go back to Nicole, and if she demands he cut you off again, you don't have to accept that. You can love him and still protect yourself." "But he's my son." "Yes. And you're a person with worth and dignity who deserves to be treated with respect. Even by your son. Especially by your son." Helen sank onto her bed, feeling tears start. "I just got him back, Claire. We were rebuilding. It was hard, but we were doing it. And now Nicole snaps her fingers and he's ready to throw it all away?" "You don't know that yet," Claire said gently. "He might surprise you. He might choose differently this time. And if he doesn't, then you survive it. Like you survived it before. You have your painting, your friends, your life. You're not the same woman you were 2 years ago, Helen. You're stronger now." "I don't feel stronger. I feel terrified." "That's because you love him. But love doesn't mean letting yourself be destroyed. You can love Marcus and still say, 'I will not be invisible in your life again. I will not accept being treated as disposable. I deserve better than that.'" Helen wiped her eyes. What if saying that means losing him? Then he was already lost. You can't lose something you don't really have. The words were harsh but true. Helen had learned over the past months that she couldn't force Marcus to value her. She could only value herself and hope he'd rise to meet that standard. "I'm scared," Helen whispered. "I know, but you're also capable. You've already proven you can survive without him." Now you just need to remember that you can survive whatever choice he makes. After hanging up with Claire, Helen sat alone in her room thinking. She'd taken Marcus in when he was broken. She'd supported him through therapy, through job hunting, through the painful work of rebuilding himself. She'd done everything a mother could do, but she couldn't make his choices for him. And she couldn't destroy herself trying to keep him if he chose to leave again. Whatever Marcus decided, Helen would have to find a way to survive it. She'd done it before. She could do it again. Even if the thought of it made her want to curl up and die. Marcus came home on a rainy Wednesday evening looking exhausted. Helen was painting in the guest room. Her meditation, her peace, her way of staying centered when everything felt chaotic. "Mom, can we talk?" Helen set down her brush. "Of course." They sat in the living room, and Marcus looked at her with an expression Helen couldn't quite read. "I've decided to try counseling with Nicole." Helen's heart sank, but she kept her face neutral. "Okay. Not to get back together immediately," Marcus continued quickly, "but to see if there's anything salvageable. I need to know I tried everything before I walk away from my marriage completely." Helen nodded slowly. "I understand." "You do?" Marcus looked surprised. "Yes. You need to make your own choices, Marcus. Even choices I might disagree with." "You think I'm making a mistake?" "I think you're choosing hope over wisdom. But I also think you're an adult who gets to make his own mistakes." Marcus looked at her with tears in his eyes. "I'm not going to disappear again, Mom. I promise. Whatever happens with Nicole, whatever she asks, I won't cut you out of my life." Helen wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him. But she'd heard promises before. "Marcus, I need you to understand something." Helen's voice was steady despite her shaking hands. "I love you. I will always love you. You're my son, and nothing changes that. But I can't go back to being invisible. If you reconcile with Nicole, and she starts making the same demands, that you see me less, that you prioritize her family, that you prove your love by erasing me, I need you to choose differently this time." "I will, Mom. I swear I will." "Don't swear, just show me." Helen leaned forward. "Actions, not words. That's what I need from you. Not promises, but consistent, sustained proof that I matter to you." Marcus nodded, understanding. "That's fair, more than fair. And if you can't do that, if Nicole's love requires my absence, then I need you to know. I will always love you, but I will love you from a distance that doesn't destroy me. Do you understand?" "Yes," Marcus whispered. "I survived losing you once. I built a life. I found joy. I will do it again if I have to. But I hope, God, I hope I don't have to." They sat in heavy silence. Finally, Marcus said, "I won't let it happen again. Whatever Nicole wants, whatever she demands, I won't abandon you. You have my word." "I hope so," Helen said, "because I don't think I can survive being replaced twice." 2 weeks later, Marcus packed his bags. He and Nicole had found a neutral apartment. Not her house, not somewhere loaded with memories. A fresh start, their therapist had suggested. Helen helped him pack, folding clothes with practiced efficiency, trying not to think about how familiar this felt. How many times had she helped Marcus pack for various life transitions? College, his first apartment, moving in with Nicole. This felt different, though. More ominous. "I'll call you every Sunday," Marcus said at the door. "Like I used to. That's a promise." "We'll see," Helen said, unable to commit to believing him. They hugged goodbye. Marcus held on tight, and Helen let herself have this moment, holding her son, loving him, while simultaneously preparing for the possibility that this might be the last time for a while. "Thank you, Mom, for everything, for taking me in when I had nowhere else to go, for being honest even when it was hard, for loving me even when I didn't deserve it. You always deserve love, Marcus. You don't always deserve my presence. There's a difference." He pulled back, looking at her with understanding. "I know. And I'm going to prove I deserve both." Helen watched him drive away, then closed the door and leaned against it. She didn't cry this time. She just felt tired. Tired of hoping. Tired of being hurt. Tired of loving someone who kept choosing to leave. She thought about calling Claire or Ruth or Peter. Instead, she went to her painting room, picked up her brush, and lost herself in color. She'd survive this. Whatever happened next, she'd survive it. She'd proven that already. After Marcus left, Helen returned to her life. The life she'd built when he first disappeared. The life that didn't require his presence to have meaning. Painting class on Thursdays, book club on Fridays, Saturday farmers markets with Ruth, Sunday brunches with Claire or sometimes Peter, who'd become an increasingly important presence in her life. He left again? Peter asked gently over coffee one Sunday. To try to save his marriage, Helen explained. I can't fault him for that, but I also can't pretend it doesn't hurt. Peter reached across the table and took her hand. You're allowed to be hurt and supportive at the same time. Those aren't mutually exclusive. Helen appreciated Peter's steady presence. He wasn't dramatic or passionate. He was just there, reliable, kind. He showed up when he said he would. He called when he said he'd call. He made no grand promises, but kept the small ones consistently. After a lifetime of people who promised everything and delivered nothing, Peter's quiet consistency felt like a gift. Marcus texted occasionally. Brief updates. Therapy is hard, but good. How are you? Hope work is going well. Helen responded with equal brevity. She wasn't cold, just protected, matching his energy instead of pouring her heart into messages he might not read. The Sunday calls Marcus had promised never materialized. First week. Sorry, Mom, got caught up in something. We'll call next week for sure. Second week, nothing. Third week, things have been crazy, I'll call soon. After that, Helen stopped expecting them. She didn't chase him, didn't guilt him, didn't send long texts about how hurt she was. She just let him go. If he wanted to be in her life, he'd make the effort. If he didn't, well, she'd survive that too. Her painting had gotten genuinely good. Thomas, her instructor, had asked if she'd consider selling some pieces in the community center's annual art show. Really? Helen had been stunned. Really, you've developed a unique style. People would buy these. She'd sold 3 paintings at the show, small amounts, $50 each. But it wasn't about the money. It was about someone valuing something she'd created. Someone seeing worth in her work. Her. Not Marcus's mother. Not David's widow. Not anyone's anything. Just Helen, artist, teacher, woman with her own value. It felt revolutionary. What Helen didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that Marcus was drowning. Couples counseling with Nicole had started with hope. Both of them committed to change, both claiming they wanted to save the marriage. But sessions quickly revealed fundamental problems. Their therapist, Dr. Reynolds, was skilled at asking uncomfortable questions. Nicole, when Marcus talks about his mother, you become visibly tense. Can you explore that reaction? His relationship with her was unhealthy, Nicole said defensively. He was obsessed with her opinion. Couldn't make decisions without consulting her first. Is that true, Marcus? Dr. Reynolds asked. Marcus thought about it honestly. I valued my mom's input, yes. But obsessed? No, I love her. She's important to me. And that threatened you? Dr. Reynolds asked Nicole. It wasn't about threat, it was about priorities. When you're married, your spouse should come first. First, yes, Dr. Reynolds agreed. But not only. Healthy marriages don't require cutting off other relationships. Nicole's jaw tightened. I never asked him to cut her off. You said I needed boundaries, Marcus countered, surprising himself with his firmness. You got upset every time I made plans with her. You rolled your eyes when I mentioned her. You made me feel guilty for loving my mother. That's not fair. You didn't invite her to my birthday party, Marcus said, his voice rising. You told your mother to organize it and specifically excluded my mom. How is that not asking me to cut her off? Nicole looked caught. That was Your mother and I had tension. I was trying to avoid conflict. By excluding her completely? By making her feel invisible? Dr. Reynolds intervened. It seems like there's a pattern here. Nicole, you've mentioned several times that Marcus wasn't ambitious enough, wasn't social enough, wasn't enough in various ways. Can you explore where that criticism comes from? Over the following weeks, patterns emerged that Marcus could no longer ignore. Nicole had a vision of who she wanted Marcus to be. Successful corporate architect, ambitious, socially prominent, emotionally independent from his family. But that wasn't who Marcus was. He was a decent architect who liked small projects. He was content with modest success. He was proud of being close to his mother. Nicole had been trying to mold him into someone else for 5 years, and Marcus had been trying desperately to become that person. I'm exhausted, Marcus admitted in one session. I'm exhausted from trying to be who you need me to be. I'm trying to help you reach your potential, Nicole said. No, Marcus said quietly. You're trying to change my potential, to redefine it as what you value instead of what I value. That's not... You had an affair, Nicole. Marcus's voice was calm but firm. While you were telling me I wasn't enough, you were sleeping with someone else. And now you want me to believe that with enough therapy, you'll somehow be satisfied with who I am? Nicole started crying. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. Can't we move past it? But Marcus was beginning to realize the affair wasn't the problem. It was a symptom. Nicole had never really loved him. She'd loved the idea of who he could become, the man she could shape him into. The real Marcus, with his modest career and his love for his mother and his contentment with simple pleasures, had never been enough for her. He would never be enough for her, because enough kept moving farther away. In their final counseling session, Dr. Reynolds asked them each to envision their ideal future together. Nicole described a life of corporate success, beautiful homes, impressive social circles, Marcus leading major projects, children in private schools, a marriage that looked perfect from the outside. Marcus described Sunday dinners with his mother, painting on weekends, maybe teaching architecture to kids, a modest but comfortable life. Children who knew their grandmother, a marriage built on acceptance rather than achievement. The visions couldn't have been more different. I notice, Dr. Reynolds said carefully, that your ideal futures don't seem compatible. They could be if Marcus would just... Nicole started. No, Marcus interrupted. They can't be. Because your ideal future requires me to become someone I'm not. And Nicole, I can't do that anymore. I tried for 5 years and all it did was make me miserable and destroy my relationship with my mother. So you're choosing your mother over me? Nicole's voice was sharp. I'm choosing myself, Marcus corrected. I'm choosing to be someone who doesn't apologize for loving my family, someone who's content with a modest career, someone who paints terrible watercolors on Sunday mornings and calls his mother weekly and finds joy in small things. He looked at Nicole with sudden clarity. You never really loved me. You loved the potential you saw in me, the man you thought you could create. But I'm not a project, Nicole. I'm a person, and the person I am isn't enough for you. He never will be. Nicole's face crumpled. That's not true. It is true, and that's okay. We want different things. We're different people. The affair was just the catalyst. It would have ended eventually anyway, because I can't spend my life trying to earn love that comes with conditions I can't meet. Dr. Reynolds asked gently, What are you saying, Marcus? I'm saying I want the divorce to proceed. I'm saying this marriage is over. Not with anger or bitterness, but with acceptance. We're not right for each other. And that's okay. Nicole left the session in tears. Marcus left feeling lighter than he had in 5 years. He'd chosen himself, and in doing so, he'd chosen his mother too. Not over Nicole, but alongside himself, where she'd always belonged. For 6 months, Helen heard almost nothing from Marcus. Occasional texts, brief, surface level. Therapy is ongoing. Hope you're well. Thinking of you. But no phone calls, no visits, no real connection. Helen tried not to let it devastate her. She had her life, her friends, her painting. Peter, who'd become more serious. They'd said, "I love you" for the first time just last month. But she missed her son, missed him with an ache that never fully went away. She wondered if this was her life now, if Marcus had chosen Nicole permanently, if Helen would spend the rest of her life loving her son from a distance, waiting for texts that came less and less frequently. Claire tried to comfort her. Maybe no news is good news. Maybe he's working on things. Or maybe he's forgotten me again, Helen said. She tried not to be bitter, tried to focus on what she had instead of what she'd lost. But some nights, alone in her house, she let herself grieve. Grieve the son she'd raised, the relationship they'd had, the future she'd imagined where grandchildren called her weekly and Marcus was a real presence in her life. That future felt further away than ever, and Helen didn't know if it would ever come back. What she didn't know, Marcus had finalized his divorce, had moved into a small studio apartment, had been working with Dr. Chen on becoming the man he wanted to be, and had been terrified to reach out to his mother after 6 months of minimal contact. Terrified she wouldn't want him back, terrified he'd hurt her too badly to fix, terrified that he'd lost his last chance. But he was finally ready to try, ready to show up, ready to prove through actions, not words, that he meant everything he'd promised. He just had to find the courage to start. It was a Thursday evening in late April, almost 7 months since Marcus had moved out. Helen was setting up for her watercolor workshop, her monthly teaching session that had become one of her favorite things. 12 students had registered. Helen knew most of them, regulars who'd been coming for months, a few new faces. She was arranging easels when Ruth nudged her. "Helen, someone's at the door." Helen looked up, and there, standing in the doorway holding a bag of art supplies, was Marcus. Helen froze. He looked different. Thinner, maybe. More tired, but also somehow more settled, more himself. "Hi, Mom," he said quietly. "I know I should have called, but I was hoping... Could I join the class tonight?" Helen's heart was pounding. What was he doing here? Where was Nicole? What had happened? But she had a class to teach. 12 students waiting. "There's an easel by the window," she said, keeping her voice steady. Marcus sat up quietly, not demanding attention, not explaining anything, just participating. Helen taught the class on autopilot, her mind spinning with questions even as she demonstrated techniques and offered guidance. Marcus painted alongside the other students. His sunset landscape was still terrible. Colors muddying, proportions wrong, trees that looked more like blobs than vegetation. But he was trying, present, focused. When Helen circled to his easel to offer feedback, she paused. "That's creative," she said, unable to help the small smile. Marcus laughed. "You mean awful." "I mean yours," Helen corrected gently. And in that moment, something passed between them. Recognition, hope, the beginning of understanding. After class, as students cleaned up, Marcus approached her hesitantly. "Can we talk? Maybe get coffee?" Helen glanced at Ruth, who shooed her toward the door. "Go, I'll clean up." They drove separately to the quiet cafe they'd been to months ago, before everything fell apart. Marcus ordered her favorite, chamomile tea with honey. He remembered. They sat in a corner booth, and for a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Marcus said, "Nicole and I are divorced. Finalized 3 weeks ago." Helen's hands tightened around her mug. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It was the right choice. The only choice, really." He told her everything. About the months of counseling, about Nicole's inability to accept who Marcus actually was, about the final session where they'd acknowledged their visions for life were incompatible. "I tried, Mom. I really tried to save the marriage. But some things aren't meant to be saved. Why didn't you call me?" Helen's voice was tight. 7 months, Marcus. 7 months of barely hearing from you. Because I was ashamed. Because I'd promised I wouldn't disappear, and then I disappeared anyway. Because I was afraid you wouldn't want me back. Marcus took a shaky breath and continued. "I've been in therapy twice a week since I moved out. Dr. Chen and I have been working on everything, Codependency, boundaries, people-pleasing, fear of abandonment, all the stuff that made me easy to manipulate. Helen listened, not interrupting. I learned so much about myself, Mom. About how losing Dad created this wound that never healed. About how I became hypervigilant about making people happy so they wouldn't leave me. About how Nicole exploited that and I let her. Marcus, let me finish, please. He wiped his eyes. I destroyed our relationship. Not just because Nicole told me to, but because I was too weak to say no. Too terrified of losing her to protect what actually mattered. He looked at Helen with devastated honesty. You were always there. Always consistent. Always loving me. Even when I was unlovable. And I took that for granted. I assumed you'd always be there, so I could ignore you when it was convenient and you'd still be waiting when I needed you. That's true, Helen said quietly. You did take me for granted. I know, and I'm so fucking sorry. He was crying now, not trying to hide it. I'm sorry for disappearing. I'm sorry for choosing Nicole over you, over and over again. I'm sorry for your birthday, for my wedding, for every moment I made you feel invisible. Helen felt her own tears coming. Why now, Marcus? Why show up now? Because I'm finally ready. Not ready to need you. I've always needed you. But ready to deserve you. Ready to put in the work, not just promise to do better. He pulled out his phone and showed her his calendar. See this? Sunday, 10 a.m. Every single Sunday. Call Mom. It's a recurring event that won't let me forget. I know that sounds mechanical, but I need the reminder until it becomes automatic again. He scrolled to show her other events. Mom's book club performance. He'd gotten the day wrong, but the thought was there. Mom's birthday, take off work. Mom's painting show. I've been following your life from a distance, Marcus admitted. Ruth posts about class sometimes. Claire updates me when I ask. I've been watching you live this amazing life, and I've been terrified that there's no room for me anymore. There's always room for you, Helen whispered. But Marcus, I can't go back to how things were. I need consistency. Real effort. Not promises. Actions. I know. That's why I didn't just call. That's why I showed up at your class, your space, your world, your terms. I'm not asking you to come back into my life. I'm asking to be part of yours. Helen felt something crack open in her chest. The divorce is final. Marcus continued. I have an apartment. A job that I actually like. Small firm, sustainable housing projects, exactly what I wanted. A therapist I see weekly. Friends I've been rebuilding relationships with. I'm building a life, Mom, but it feels empty without you in it. I don't know if I can trust you again, Helen said honestly. I don't expect you to. Not yet. But I'm asking for a chance to earn it back. Slowly. With boundaries. With you in control. Helen looked at her son. Really looked at him. She saw genuine remorse. Real change. But she also saw 7 months of silence. Broken promises. Pattern of abandonment. I need time, she said. I need to see consistent action over months, not just good intentions. Fair, Marcus said immediately. More than fair. And I have a life now, Marcus. Peter and I are serious. I have friends, commitments, a teaching schedule. If you want to be part of my life, you fit into it. You don't expect me to rearrange it. I understand. I'm not asking you to center your life around me. I'm asking to be included in the life you've built. Helen took a sip of her tea, thinking. 7 months ago, she would have said yes immediately. Would have been so grateful for his return that she'd have accepted anything. Now she was stronger, more cautious, more protective of her own heart. Okay, she said finally. We can try. But Marcus, this is your last chance. If you hurt me again, if you disappear again, I will love you from a permanent distance. Do you understand? I understand. And I won't. I swear to you, I won't. Don't swear, just show up. They sat in the cafe for 2 more hours, talking carefully, honestly, beginning the slow work of rebuilding trust. When they finally left, Marcus hugged her goodbye. "Thank you for giving me another chance, Mom." "Don't make me regret it," Helen said. But as she drove home, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Cautious, fragile, but real. Maybe they really could rebuild. Maybe this time would be different. She'd know soon enough. Over the following months, Marcus kept his promises. Every Sunday morning at 10 a.m., her phone rang. Not a text, a call. "Hey, Mom, how was your week?" And they'd talk, really talk, about Helen's painting class, about Marcus's work projects, about Ruth's latest disastrous date, about the book Helen was reading. Conversations that lasted 30 minutes, sometimes an hour. Conversations where Marcus actually listened, asked follow-up questions, remembered details. He showed up to her monthly painting workshops, still terrible at painting, but enthusiastic and supportive. He befriended her students, made them laugh, helped clean up afterward. He came to her book club's annual poetry reading, where Helen nervously shared a poem she'd written. He sat in the front row and clapped the loudest. He met Peter properly over dinner. Awkward at first, two men who loved the same woman trying to figure out how to coexist. "Your mom talks about you a lot," Peter said diplomatically. "Hopefully not all bad," Marcus joked, then added seriously, "I put her through hell. I'm working on doing better." Peter nodded approvingly. "That's all any of us can do." Marcus integrated into Helen's friend group. Ruth adopted him like a grandson, giving him terrible advice about dating that made everyone laugh. Martin talked to him about architecture and sustainable design. Lisa's daughter and Marcus became friends, their shared experience of complicated parental relationships creating connection. For Helen's birthday, Marcus showed up with flowers and took the entire day off work. Brunch, a museum visit, dinner at her favorite restaurant. No excuses, no divided attention. Just presents. "This is what I should have been doing all along," Marcus said over birthday cake. "Yes," Helen agreed, "but you're doing it now. That's what matters." At Christmas, Marcus made sure Helen was included in every plan. He hosted dinner at his small apartment. Helen, Claire, Peter, Ruth, Martin, Lisa, and her family. A chosen family gathered around a too-small table, laughing and eating and celebrating. Nicole's name came up once. Someone asked if Marcus was dating. "Not yet," he said. "I'm focused on rebuilding the relationships I damaged. Romance can wait." Helen caught his eye across the table and smiled. He was doing the work. Really doing it. And she was starting to believe he wouldn't disappear again. One Sunday, 6 months after Marcus had shown up at painting class, he and Helen sat in her kitchen drinking tea. "Mom, can I tell you something?" "Always." "Thank you for not giving up on me. Even when I gave up on you. Even when I didn't deserve your love. Thank you for having boundaries, for making me earn back your trust, for showing me what real love looks like." Helen squeezed his hand. "That's what mothers do, sweetheart. We love you through the stupidity until you find wisdom." Marcus laughed. "I was really stupid." "Yes, you were," Helen agreed without malice. "But you grew. That's what matters. I promise I'll never take you for granted again." "Don't promise, just keep showing up." "I will, every Sunday, every workshop, every moment you'll let me." Helen smiled. That's all I've ever wanted. 2 years after Marcus had shown up at Helen's painting class, life had found its rhythm. A good rhythm. A sustainable one. Marcus came to Sunday dinner every single week without fail. Sometimes he brought his girlfriend Amy, a middle school teacher he'd met at a community education event. She was kind, grounded, and she loved that Marcus was close to his mother. "That was a green flag for me," Amy had told Helen. "A man who loves his mother well will love his partner well." Helen adored Amy. They'd bonded over teaching, over books, over shared values about family and connection. When Marcus and Amy got engaged, simple proposal, private, meaningful, Amy had called Helen before posting anything on social media. "I wanted you to know first," Amy said. "After his mom, obviously." Helen had cried happy tears. The wedding planning included Helen from the beginning. No competing mothers-in-law, no power struggles. Amy's mother Janet was lovely, and she and Helen worked together seamlessly. "Thank God we both have sons who picked good partners this time," Janet joked. And Helen laughed, understanding the reference to Amy's previous boyfriend who'd been controlling and awful. Marcus had been promoted at his firm, not because he was chasing corporate success, but because he was genuinely good at what he did. He led sustainable housing projects, work he found meaningful. He still painted every Thursday at Helen's classes, still produced objectively terrible sunsets, but he'd gotten marginally better, and more importantly, he'd found joy in the process. Helen's own art had flourished. She'd had a small show at a local gallery. She'd been featured in a regional art magazine. She taught 3 workshops a month now, plus her regular Thursday class. Peter had become a permanent fixture. They'd moved in together a year ago, his steady presence a gift Helen never took for granted. "I never thought I'd have this," Helen told Claire one day. "A partner who's reliable, a son who's present, a life that feels full." "You built it," Claire reminded her. "You chose yourself when it was hard. Everything else followed." It was true. The life Helen had now, rich with connection, creativity, purpose, had come from choosing herself when Marcus had first replaced her. If she'd stayed small, stayed waiting, stayed desperate for his attention, none of this would exist. Sometimes the worst things lead to the best things. Sometimes loss is the beginning of finding yourself. Helen's support group for divorced and widowed women had become a cornerstone of the community. She'd been facilitating it for over 2 years now, and women came from all over the county. Some driving an hour each way to attend. One evening, a new woman joined. Margaret, late 50s, crying before she even introduced herself. "My daughter got married 6 months ago," Margaret said, "and since then I've become invisible. Her husband doesn't like me, says I'm too opinionated, too involved, so my daughter barely calls anymore. I wasn't invited to Thanksgiving. I found out through Facebook that I'm going to be a grandmother." The other women nodded, understanding this particular pain. "I don't know what I did wrong," Margaret sobbed. "I was a good mother. I sacrificed everything for her, and now she's just done with me." Helen let her cry, then said gently, "You didn't do anything wrong, Margaret. You loved your daughter. That's not a crime." "Then why does it feel like punishment?" "Because love without boundaries becomes self-destruction. Because when we make our entire identity about being someone's mother, we forget to be ourselves. And when our children grow up and don't need us the same way, we don't know who we are anymore." Helen shared her story, not from a place of "I fixed everything," but from honesty. About Marcus replacing her, about the months of depression, about learning to choose herself. "My son came back into my life," Helen said, "but not because I waited desperately. Because I built a life worth being part of. And when he did come back, I was strong enough to demand better." "What if our children never come back?" another woman asked. What if we've lost them forever?" Helen considered this carefully. She'd thought about this question a lot over the years. "Then you love them from a distance that doesn't destroy you. You can love someone and still protect yourself. That's not cruelty. That's wisdom. That's survival." She told them about painting, about finding purpose beyond motherhood, about building chosen family when blood family wasn't available. "You are more than someone's mother," Helen said. "You are whole people with value that exists independent of whether your children recognize it." After the session, Margaret approached Helen. "Thank you. Not for false hope that my daughter will change, but for permission to build a life anyway." "That's the only permission you need," Helen said. "Your own." Over the years, Helen had received countless letters and messages from women whose lives had shifted after attending her group. Some reconnected with their children. Some didn't. But all of them learned to survive either way. That was the real gift. Not guaranteeing reconciliation, but guaranteeing that they'd be okay regardless. Marcus and Amy's wedding was everything a wedding should be: joyful, meaningful, personal. Helen had been part of every decision. Not controlling things, but genuinely included. Consulted, valued. The ceremony was in a garden in early June. Surrounded by flowers and sunshine and everyone who mattered, during the reception, Marcus stood to give a speech. I need to take a moment to acknowledge some people, he began, holding Amy's hand. First, Amy, for loving me exactly as I am, for never asking me to choose between her and the people I love, for understanding that my relationship with my mother isn't a threat but a strength, for showing me what healthy love actually looks like. Guests smiled, raising glasses. But I also need to acknowledge my mother. Marcus turned to look at Helen, sitting at a table with Peter, Claire, and Ruth. Mom, you're probably surprised I'm doing this, but I need to say this publicly in front of everyone. Helen felt tears starting already. Several years ago, I made the worst mistake of my life. I let someone convince me that loving you was a weakness, that including you in my life was unhealthy, that I needed to choose between my wife and my mother. The room had gone quiet, everyone listening. I chose wrong. I hurt you in ways I can never fully repair. I made you feel invisible, worthless, disposable. I took your love for granted and treated it like it didn't matter. Helen was crying openly now. And when my life fell apart, when I had nowhere else to go, you took me in anyway. You didn't say I told you so. You didn't punish me. You loved me, but you also held boundaries. You demanded I do better. You showed me what healthy love actually requires. Marcus's voice cracked. You could have stayed broken when I abandoned you. Instead, you built a life. You found painting, found friends, found purpose. You chose yourself. And that gave me a model for how to choose myself too. He raised his glass. Mom, thank you for never giving up on me, even when I gave up on you. Thank you for showing me that real love includes honesty, boundaries, and respect. Thank you for being the mother I always needed, even when I was too stupid to see it. The reception erupted in applause. Helen was sobbing. Peter had his arm around her. Claire was crying. Ruth was wiping her eyes. Marcus walked over to Helen's table and hugged her tight. I love you, Mom, and I will never, ever take you for granted again. I know, Helen whispered. I know you won't. That night, sitting on her porch with Peter, watching fireflies dance in the summer darkness, Helen reflected on the journey, from being replaced to being celebrated, from invisible to essential, from broken to whole. It had been the hardest journey of her life. Harder than widowhood, harder than raising Marcus alone, harder than anything she'd ever endured. Because losing someone who's still alive is a special kind of torture. But she'd survived it. More than survived. She'd thrived. She'd learned that you can love your children fiercely and still protect your own heart. That being a good mother doesn't mean destroying yourself. That boundaries are a form of love, not a rejection of it. That your worth isn't determined by whether your children see it. She thought about all the women in her support group, all searching for the same thing, to be valued by their children while still maintaining their own worth. It was a delicate balance, one that required constant navigation. But it was possible. Marcus had come back, had done the work, had become the son she'd always known he could be. But Helen knew the deeper truth. She'd have been okay even if he hadn't. She'd built a life that didn't require his validation to have meaning. That was the real victory. Not getting her son back, though that was wonderful. But getting herself back. Finding Helen beneath all the roles, mother, widow, teacher, artist, friend, partner. Remembering that she was a whole person with value beyond who needed her. That was the gift. That was what she wanted every woman to know. You are not just someone's mother. You are not just someone's wife. You are not defined by the roles you play or the people who may or may not value you. You are whole, complete, valuable, exactly as you are. Marcus's wife had replaced her. And in losing that central role in her son's life, Helen had found something more important. Herself. She'd chosen herself. And everything else, Marcus's return, her art, her chosen family, her love with Peter, had followed from that choice. The porch light glowed warm in the darkness. Peter squeezed her hand. Inside, she could hear Claire and Marcus and Amy laughing about something. Her life was full. Not perfect, nothing ever is. but full of connection, purpose, creativity, love, full of herself, and that, Helen thought, was more than enough. And so, dear friend, that's Helen's story. A story about a mother who was replaced, who watched her son choose his wife over her, again and again, until she became invisible in the life she'd devoted herself to creating. A story about the particular grief of losing someone who's still alive, about the confusion of wondering what you did wrong when your only crime was loving deeply. But more than that, so much more than that, it's a story about what came after. Because Helen could have stayed broken, could have stayed waiting desperately by the phone, accepting crumbs, making herself smaller and smaller to fit into whatever space her son might offer. Instead, she chose herself. Not immediately, not easily, but eventually, painfully, courageously. She built a life, found painting, created community, became someone beyond Marcus's mother. She became Helen, artist, teacher, friend, partner, whole person with value that existed independent of whether her son recognized it. And when Marcus came back, broken and desperate and needing her, she loved him. Of course she loved him. But she loved him with boundaries. She loved him with honesty. She loved him from a place of strength, not desperation. And that changed everything. Because here's what Helen learned. What I pray you'll take from her story. You can be a devoted mother and still have boundaries. You can love your children fiercely and still protect your own heart. You can welcome them back into your life and still demand better treatment. Love is not martyrdom. Love is not destroying yourself to make room for someone else. Real love, healthy, sustainable love, requires that you love yourself first. If you're a mother who's been replaced, sidelined by a daughter-in-law or a son-in-law who sees you as competition, dismissed by an adult child who takes you for granted, forgotten by someone you die for, I need you to hear this. It's not your fault. You didn't fail as a mother because your child is failing to see your worth. You didn't do something wrong because someone convinced your child that loving you was unhealthy. You are not too much, too needy, too involved. You are a mother who loves her child. That's not a character flaw. That's not something to apologize for. But, and this is crucial, you are also a whole person beyond that role. You have value that exists independent of whether your children recognize it. You have worth that doesn't require their validation. You deserve a life that brings you joy, fulfillment, and purpose, even if your children aren't part of it the way you hoped. Helen found painting. You might find something else. It doesn't matter what it is. What matters is that you find something that reminds you. You are more than someone saying, I'm his mother. And here's the beautiful thing Helen discovered. When you build a life from that place of wholeness, when you stop waiting desperately and start living fully, one of two things happens. Either your children recognize what they're losing and do the work to rebuild the relationship. They show up consistently. They prove through actions, not words, that you matter to them. Or they don't. And here's the profound truth. You'll be okay either way. Some adult children, like Marcus, will wake up. They'll realize what they almost lost. They'll do the therapy, set the boundaries, make the hard choices to rebuild. If that happens to you, treasure it. Celebrate it. But maintain those boundaries. Demand continued respect. Love them from a place of strength that won't tolerate being invisible again. And some adult children won't wake up. They'll want you available when convenient, but refuse to make you a priority. They'll want the benefits of having a mother without the work of maintaining the relationship. If that happens to you, and I'm so sorry if it does, you have permission to love them from a distance, to wish them well while protecting yourself, to be unavailable for treatment that diminishes you. That's not cruelty. That's self-respect. That's survival. Your children don't owe you their lives. They're adults. They get to make their own choices. But you don't owe them your self-destruction. You don't owe them access to you that comes at the cost of your own well-being. You can love them and still say, I deserve better than this. Helen's son replaced her with his wife until he needed a mother again. And when he came back, Helen could have made two choices: fold completely, grateful for any attention, or refuse completely, protecting herself by shutting him out forever. She chose a third path, conditional re-engagement. She loved him, she helped him, but she demanded change. Real, sustained, proven change. And because she demanded it from a place of strength, Marcus rose to meet it. But here's the deepest truth. Helen would have been okay either way. If Marcus had stayed with Nicole, had continued to keep Helen at a distance, had never truly come back, it would have hurt. Of course it would have hurt. But Helen had built a life that could withstand that hurt. She had friends, purpose, passion, love, community, art. She had herself, and that was enough. So if you're listening to this and seeing yourself in Helen's story, if you're the mother who's been replaced, who waits by the phone, who sees social media posts of family gatherings you weren't invited to, I want you to know, you have a choice. You can keep waiting, keep shrinking, keep accepting treatment that breaks your heart. Or you can choose yourself. You can build a life so full and beautiful and meaningful that being excluded hurts less because you're busy living your own. You can love your children fiercely and still protect your heart. You can be a good mother and still have boundaries. You can hope they'll change and still build a life that doesn't require their change to be worthwhile. It's not easy. Helen's journey wasn't easy. There were tears and heartbreak and moments she almost gave up, but she didn't. She chose herself, day after day, decision after decision. And in doing so, she not only saved herself, she showed her son what real love looks like. Love that's honest, respectful, mutual, sustainable. Love that doesn't require anyone to disappear. So take Helen's story with you. Let it remind you that being replaced isn't the end of your story. It's just a painful chapter. You get to write what comes next. Will you wait in the shadows, hoping to be remembered? Or will you step into the light and build a life so bright, so full, so undeniably yours, that you shine whether anyone's watching or not? Choose yourself, dear friend. Your children may come back. They may not. But either way, choose yourself. Build the life, find the joy, become whole. And trust that real love, the kind that lasts, the kind that matters, will find room for you without requiring you to make yourself small. You are not too much. You are not disposable. You are not defined by whether your children see your worth. You are a mother, a woman, a whole, complete, valuable human being. You raised your children. You loved them. You gave them everything you had. That was your job, and you did it well. Now it's time to do something just as important. Raise yourself up. Love yourself. Give yourself everything you deserve. Your worth doesn't decrease because someone couldn't see it. Your value doesn't diminish because someone took it for granted. You are enough. You have always been enough. And you deserve to be seen, cherished, and celebrated by your children if they're capable, but most importantly, by yourself. So go build that life, dear friend. Paint the paintings, join the classes, make the friends, find the love. Create something so beautiful that you forget to wait for anyone's approval to enjoy it. Live so fully that being excluded from someone else's life barely registers because you're busy living your own. And if your children come back, truly come back, with actions and consistency and real change, welcome them in, but welcome them into a life that already had meaning before they returned. That's the secret. That's the gift Helen gives us. Not the promise that our children will change, but the promise that we can survive, even thrive, whether they do or not. Your story isn't over. It's just beginning. Now go write it.